The sixth day of the month of Nisan, as we are getting closer and closer to Zman Cherusenu, to the Geula of Pesach Be'ezras Hashem. We are at the bottom of Daf Daled Amud Beis, one line or so from the bottom of the Amud, going on to Daf Hey Amud Aleph, which is our Amud for today. We had spoken about the questions about brothers that inherited their father's estate, and we had discussed that there is an inverse relationship between Ma'aser Behema and the paying of the Kolban. And now the Gemara is going to point out that it's not necessarily true that whenever you have a Kolban, you don't have Ma'aser Behema. Whenever you don't have a Kolban, you do have Ma'aser Behema. It is possible to have a Kolban and also Ma'aser Behema, and it's possible to have neither. And those two cases begin one line from the bottom of Daled Amud Beis. Says the Gemara, Reb Chia Amar Reb Yirmiyah. Boy, Reb Chia in the name of Reb Yirmiyah asked the following question: Velama leis non amrinan? Why do we not say Pam shein chayavim bazeh bazeh? Why is it that we never say in the Mishnah that sometimes it happens that you are chayav in both Meiser and Kolban? Why don't we say such a din? And turning over the page, Upamim shein b'turim zeh mizeh umizeh. And why do we not list the case of saying that there'd be potter from both Meiser and the Kolban? What exactly would these cases be? Meaning, we should say this. Heyecha avida. How would it work out? How would it work out that this would be the case? Chilku es ha-nechasim v'achar כך chilku es ha-behema. If you had a situation that they divided up all of the property, but did not divide up the animals, chayavin bazeh ubazeh, then they would be chayav in both the Kolban, because they would be partnering in the Maseches shekel. They would give one coin for both of them, and then they'd be chayv in Kolban, and they'd be parted from Ma'aser Behema, because the behemoths are still part of the estate. They haven't yet divided that up. It's still part of the original father's estate. In such a case, you'd be chayv in both. And if they divided all of the animals, and then they gave them Maseches shekel in between, and then they divided up all the property, then they'd be patur from both of them. Meaning, if they divided up the behemoths, then the behemoths, the babies that were born while it was still in the father's estate, don't belong, meaning didn't belong to any of them at the time of birth. They belong to the father's estate, so both of them would be pater from Ma'aser Behema, and they'd be pater from the Kolban, because the father's estate is still giving the Maseches shekel on behalf of both of them. Says the Gemara, Chilku ha-nechasim v'lo chelku behema, in the case that they divided up the estate and they didn't divide up the behemoths, meaning they divided up the money, and they didn't divide up the animals, that's where they'd be chayv in both. As we just said, if they divided up the animals and they did not divide up the rest of the property, they'd be pater from both. Amar Rabbi Mana, says Rabbi Mana, Hada da'as Amar, that which you just said, meaning when they divided up the property but not the animals, they'd still be chayv in the Kolban, b'ishlam ha'isa behema roiv. That only makes sense if the majority of the estate was not animals. Meaning, when the majority of the estate was not animals. But if the majority of the estate was animals, then that is actually the majority of the estate. Meaning, there's a caveat to this. If you're talking about a farm, and the majority of the assets are animals, so the fact that you haven't divided up the animals yet doesn't mean that you've divided up the estate. You haven't divided up the estate. You've just divided up a small amount of property, and then it wouldn't take effect. It would still be part of the tfisas habayis, the father's estate, and would be chayiv in Ma'aser Behema in that case. Says the Gemara as follows: Rabbi Abin Amar Rabbi Shammai boy. That's the Shammai without the aleph in the Yerushalmi. So Rabbi Shammai boy, they asked the following question: because you have considered it to be one person regarding Ma'aser Behema, at Potra min Kolban, you are going to exempt him from the Kolban. Meaning, what is this relationship between these two things? Rabbi Shammai is asking the question. I don't get it. Just because you've decided that it's the father's estate, it still is the father's estate. With regards to Ma'aseh Behema, you're going to putter them from the korban. Why? What's the mechanism that this works under? So Amarle, so Rabbi Abin says to Rabbi Shammai, how is this different? Shehu noiten sela echad shlema, that he is giving a whole sela. He's giving a whole sela from the undivided estate, and there is no need to pay it back because the father is not claiming it back. The estate is giving it on behalf of these people, meaning it's not that these two dinim are intrinsically linked. It's that, functionally speaking, they happen to be operating under the same premise of who is the owner of this money right now. Is it the estate or is it the inheritors? And in this case, in both of these cases, you'd be talking about the estate. Says the Gemara, Me'ata, from here, based on what Rabbi Avin just told us, even if they divided up the estate and then they became partners again, then they should be chayiv in Maaseh Behema, and they'd be patur from the korban. Meaning, then you could say it's as if the father is now paying for them again. Ve'taninan, and the Mishnah says chayavim bekorban, that they be chayiv in the korban, upturim mi Maaseh Behema, and they're patur from Maaseh Behema. And the Gemara leaves this as a question. The Gemara leaves it as a question. All the Achronim ask the question, what do you mean? We know exactly. We just explained exactly how this works. That in a case of chazur v'nishtatfu, if they join back up again, so chayavim b'maaseh behema ubturim min hakorban, that is not true. Meaning they'd be chayavim b'maaseh behema. Why? They should not be chayavim b'maaseh behema, and they'd be patur on the korban. Meaning, why would that case be? This is against the Mishnah. So the Pnei Moshe says, yeah, this is a rhetorical question. Meaning, it's so obvious we know the answer to the question that the Mishnah is correct, and that's why the Gemara doesn't answer the question. That's the Mari Fulda explains. But the Achronim are bothered. Maybe there's some incorrect girsa here that the Gemara just leaves off on this tangent of a question. Alternatively, it's phrased rhetorically because now this is so obvious. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Ba b'shem Rabbi Abba Bar Huna, says Rabbi Ba in the name of Abba Bar Rav Huna, he shnei achim sheyarshu savim, he shnei gisin sheyarshu es chamem. The same din that applies to two brothers inheriting their father also applies to two brothers-in-law that inherit from their father-in-law. Meaning you have a father that only has two girls. He dies and he leaves the estate to his two sons-in-law. It would be the same din. It's not just a question of sons, but it would be a question of inheritors in general, and that is the din of the Gemara. And now the Gemara asks an additional question before we wrap up the end of the parak. Asks the Gemara as follows: Le'echan hayu ha'kolbanos naflim? Where did the korbanos go? Meaning, we know the Maseches a shekel goes to buy the public korbanos, the korbanos tzibur. Where exactly did the korban go? Meaning, what was the money of the korban ever used for? Says the Gemara, we see five shitas here. Remer says, Shekalim, it went exactly the same place as the Shekalim. It was extra money for the Shekalim. And this is consistent with Rabbi Meir's opinion that the korban was a din midaraisa to make up any lost money in the Shekalim. Rabbi Lezer says, Linadava, it went for voluntary offerings. Meaning, anytime that you have that the mizbech was idle, it wasn't being used. So, in order to be able to have the mizbech constantly be bringing korbanos, to be mekadosh Shem Shemaim, that the mizbech is operational, so they would have extra korbanos that they would bring. Reb Shimon Shizuri, Reb Shimon Shizuri says, Rikua Zahav v'tzipui lebeis kodesh hakdashim. They were used for the golden sheets that were the wall paneling of the kodesh hakdashim. Ben Azai says Shulchanim hayu noitlim osam bischaron, that this was the wages for the money exchanges, that the korban was used to pay we had to have a team of people that were changing money, and the korban was their fee. And now those that say lehotzas drachim, that it was used for the travel expenses, which the Korban Edom points out here is lehavi shkalim liYerushalayim. In order to make sure that the money got to Yerushalayim, you had to have travel expenses to make sure that it all got to Yerushalayim safely. And that is going to be the question that we are going to talk about in the second parak now. And with that, Hadron Alach Parak Be'echad Ba'adar, and we begin the next mission, the next parak. Halacha Aleph Masnisin. Says the mission as follows: Mitzarfin Shkalim Le Darkonos. That the din is that you have Jews that are living all around Eretz Yisrael, and or even throughout the Galus, and they would donate their monies to the Beis HaMikdash. How did this operate? So in every place you would have tax collectors, meaning you'd have Beis HaMikdash money collectors, and the way that they would transport this, meaning coins are heavy. So what they would do is they would exchange them. Mitzarfin shkalim, they would exchange the shkalim for darkonos. Darkonos are golden coins. Mipnei masay derech, so that it's much lighter to travel with. Kashem shahayu shofars b'mikdash, kach hayu shofars b'medina. And the same way that they were shofar meaning they were inverted horns. That's how they would. That it looked like an upside down shofar. That is how they would collect the money. In every central location, they would have a big thing bolted to the ground. That was an inverted shofar, meaning it was narrow at the top and wide at the bottom, so you could collect all the coins at the bottom, but nobody could stick their hand in. The same way says the Mishnah that they had shofars in the Mikdash to give the money. That's how they would have it all around Eretz Yisrael and around Jewish communities as well. You have a group of Jews in one particular city that send off their donations, that send off the shkalim. And they got stolen, or they got lost. If the truma had already been taken in the Beis HaMikdash, meaning the Kohanim had come around whatever point in time of the year this was, right? That the Kohanim, we saw 3 times a year, they're going to draw it. So everybody starts sending their shkalim by the 15th meaning by the Rosh Chodesh Adar, they announce it, and they've all sent it in before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So they draw on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, but some of the money has arrived in Yerushalayim already, and some of it is not. So im nitrumu truma, if they've already made the withdrawal, nishbain legizbarim, then the collectors, meaning the guys that are transporting the money, nishbain legizbarim, they have to swear to the treasures in the Beis HaMikdash, meaning because once the money is withdrawn, so any money that's on the way, and we'll discuss this a little bit more later in the parak, when the money is drawn, all money that's on the way is assumed to be part of that as well. And now, once the money is drawn, this money that has gone missing, the carriers, the couriers of the money, are going to have to take a shvua that they swear to the gizbarim of the Beis HaMikdash that they haven't stolen the money. V'im lav, but if it hasn't yet happened that the withdrawal has been made in the Beis HaMikdash, nishbain libnei ha'ir, then they have to swear to the bnei ha'ir, because the bnei ha'ir now, meaning the money is on the way to Yerushalayim, it doesn't yet belong to the Beis HaMikdash because the withdrawal hasn't been made. So there hasn't been any kind of kinyan or intention that this money is included within the withdrawal, and the bnei ha'ir now are still chayiv to give additional shkalim, and therefore the couriers are going to have to swear to the bnei ha'ir that they didn't steal. Bnei ha'ir shaklin tachtem, and the bnei ha'ir then still have to be shaklin tachtem. They still have to pay up. They haven't yet fulfilled their mitzvah Maseches shekel. Ninsu, what happens if they were found? Or the thieves, they feel bad and they brought it all back. Elu ve'elu shkalim, both the original shkalim that were stolen and the new shkalim that are donated, all of them are shkalim. They all belong to the Beis HaMikdash. Ve'ein olin lahem l'shana haba, and it does not help to say, well, I paid double this year, I don't have to pay next year. You do, meaning the money is only for this year. Next year you have to pay an additional Maseches shekel. Says the Gemara as follows: V'yasu oisam margalios. Why are we turning them into gold? Let's turn them into diamonds, into jewels, into pearls, right? Meaning into precious stones. We'll be able to, if gold carries weight, that's still heavy, so put it into whatever it is. Pearls, which are much lighter and much more valuable, says the Gemara. Shema tasil hamargalios v'nimtzayek dish mafsid. Well, because gold holds its value considerably more consistently than jewels and pearls, and maybe by the time it gets to Yerushalayim, the value of that precious precious gem is going to have gone down, and the Beis Hamikdash is going to lose out. Gehai de Tanina Taman, like we have taught in the Mishnah in Becharis, v'kulun niftim b'kesef u'v'shav kesef. All things that are redeemed, meaning you can be paid things, anything that can be redeemed is redeemed both on money and on something that is worth money. Shaveh kesef, chutz mishkalim, except for the shkalim. Meaning shkalim you cannot redeem onto all kinds of shaveh kesef. It has to be redeemed onto these gold coins. And we are not allowed to be paid the shkalim onto kelim, onto vessels. Why not? V'amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak shema yazilu hakelim v'nim ha'ekdesh mafsid. You can't turn it into kelim because maybe the kelim will lose value and the Beis Hamikdash is going to lose out. And that is the same reason that that you can't turn it into jewels and pearls, because the value might go down. The Beis Hamikdash will then lose out. Says the Gemara Masnisim be Taklin Chadtin. The Mishnah is talking about new shkalim, and the parish that we have on the side here is Taklin Chadtin, based on this din, right? Meaning the idea of Taklin Chadtin, new coins. Aval b'Taklin Atikin loy bada. But with regards to old shkalim, they don't have the same rule. Meaning there were two groups, right? There were two chests that existed in the Beis Hamikdash. There were new shkalim, the shkalim for this year, and then old shkalim, the shkalim for last year. When a person comes to the Beis Hamikdash after being neglectful to pay their dues from last year, so they violated that mitzvah, but they are still owing that money to the Beis Hamikdash. So they would come and they would put it into the pushka from last year's dues. V'tani kain, and they taught like this as well in the Brisa, atikin b'mikdash ve'in atikin b'medina, that there were collections for old shkalim in the Beis Hamikdash, but there was no collection for old shkalim out in other locations. Masnisin, and the Mishnah says, period. In the Beis Hamikdash there was a place for the shkalim from last year, but there was no place for the shkalim from last year or previous years in other locations. You had to go to the Beis Hamikdash to pay up from last year. So says the Gemara now, discussing the halacha that we just said in the Mishnah about the messengers, the couriers that lost the stuff or it got stolen. It seems to be that our Mishnah is referring to the couriers as a shomer chinam, as an unpaid god. But this would not be true if you had a shomer sachar, if the couriers were in fact paid. Amar Rabbi Abba, says Rabbi Abba, that's not true. You could even say that we're talking about a shomer sachar, meaning in general, a shomer sachar is chayiv in gneva and aveda. So swearing wouldn't take care of the problem. He would have to pay up. So you could even say that we are talking about a shomer sachar, and the case that we're talking about in the Mishnah is nignavu belistim mezuyan, that it was stolen, was not stolen by regular thieves. It wasn't that he was negligent. He was held up. It was armed robbery. And that's not called regular gneva, that's called ones. Or avdu, and the loss that we're talking about is kamisha tava svina say bayam. It's as if the svina is boat capsized at sea. That's called loss, but it's not a loss that was as a result of negligence. And in that case, nishba would be enough. You'd be able to swear. You would not be obligated to pay back. Now, the Mishnah had listed now that depending on whether or not the withdrawal had been made in the Beis Hamikdash would determine who the couriers are going to have to swear to. So Amar Rabbi Yustai bar Rabbi Simon, Asya Commander Amar Termin al Hagav Vala Asid Legavas. It seems to be that our Mishnah is of the opinion that when they took the truma, when they took the withdrawal, they did it with the intention of that which is there and that which is on the way, meaning that which they are still going to withdraw later. Baram Commander Amar Ein Termin al Loy al Ha Gibui Ve'al Ha Asid Legavas. But according to the one that says that when they withdraw the funds in the Beis Hamikdash, they did not have in mind for this, then this would not be the din. Meaning, then in both cases, the couriers would have to swear to the Bnei Ha'ir, and the Bnei Ha'ir would have to replace those shkalim, And Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, we will continue with the din of Bnei Ha'ir Sheshalchos Shekalim tomorrow. Looking forward to seeing everybody, and hope everybody is having a beautiful day.